Hello, welcome to my channel. Today we're going on a journey to World War I together. I'm sure you're curious too. Before we start the video, don't forget to write where you're listening from. I really enjoy reading your comments. In this video, I hope you listen to some history and fall asleep. If you're ready, let's embark on our time travel. World War I was one of the most devastating conflicts in human history. Erupting in 1914, this war not only deeply affected Europe, but the entire world. Empires were collapsing, societies were changing, and nations were turning against each other. This war did far more than change the life of an ordinary person. It completely altered it. If you had participated in World War I, your life would have been entirely different. It would be reshaped in an instant, in the cold, dirty, and bloody world of the front lines. Before the war began, everything in your life was normal. Then, one morning, you receive a notice. Your country is going to war, and you, as a soldier, are being sent to the front. Back then, the world was a place where power, nations, and empires fought to reach their peak. For many, this war was seen not as just a conflict, but as a mission. However, no one could have predicted how brutal the war would become. With the declaration of war, hundreds of thousands volunteered to go to the front. In the summer of 1914, European countries saw each other as enemies. For many young men, this was an opportunity to defend their homeland. During this time, societal pressure and feelings of nationalism became a powerful motivation for men to go to war. However, the decision to volunteer was not always a simple one. Military service was considered an honorable duty for many, but it also meant a great sacrifice. Going to the front often meant facing death. Still, as a young man, driven by dreams of heroism and unaware of the dangers of war, you would find yourself deciding to go to the front. Families, friends, and even neighbors expected you to join the war for the sake of your country. What was expected of you was heroism, courage, and sacrifice. On the other hand, the reality of war was far from the propaganda and romanticized ideas. Many soldiers, before they joined the war, would come to realize that war wasn't just a battle, but a matter of life and death. In the days following the declaration of war, although the decision to go to the front was hard at first, it would soon become clear that the war had become an undeniable reality. The calls from the government and the media emphasized the necessity of participation, and for many, this would become an inevitable fate. As the war began, military units were quickly formed, and the first volunteer groups started to assemble. Gradually, the idea that everyone needed to go to the front took hold. One day, you and your friends would find yourselves entering the military office on a cold winter day, registering, and placing yourselves in the shoes of a soldier. At that moment, you would realize something. No matter how young and excited you were, the brutal reality of the world was waiting for you. After the war began, the training process started rapidly. Many of those enlisted had never undergone military training before. The training was intense and lasted several weeks. However, much of the training at that time was based on a false sense of reality. Many soldiers realized that the things they learned in training didn't match the real dangers they would face on the front. Many were young men with no previous war experience, who had been doing ordinary jobs in their villages or cities. Some of the tactics shown to you during training would be of no use in real life. Sometimes you would be told that the most important thing to do in barracks life was surviving on your own. But in the harsh reality of the front, such a simple rule would become useless. At the beginning of the war, young soldiers were usually full of excitement, but the fear and tension they faced during training would force them to seriously question how mentally prepared they were. The first days in training camp would pass without any real awareness of how terrifying the war would be. However, as a soldier, after a few weeks, you would begin to realize how terrifying, complex, and dangerous the real war and life at the front would be. At some point in training, you would learn how fast a bullet travels, how gas spreads, and how to take cover in the trenches. But this knowledge would only make sense when you face real conflict. One morning, ready to depart, you and your friends stand in line at the gate of the barracks. You are traveling to the front by bus or train. At that moment, you wouldn't know that the war was about to start and everything was about to change. You would carry fear in your eyes and courage in your heart. Sometimes you would laugh, sometimes you would be introspective, but in every case, you would walk toward the same goal, the front, an unknown life. With no idea of how intense the war would be, you talk with your friends. While deep thoughts about what would happen at the front fill your mind, many think, "I'll go home when the war's over." But when you step onto the front, you begin to understand how complex and frightening everything is. Volunteering to go to the front was both a national honor and an endless fear. In the beginning, there would be an atmosphere where everyone encouraged each other. The feeling of "we are fighting together" would strengthen friendships, but at the same time, it would create a deep emptiness in one's soul. Going to the front, although it seemed like a decision filled with patriotism, would often become a struggle to survive. In the early days, you would face emotions you had never encountered before: fear, anxiety, and helplessness. With the start of the war, you would step into a new world. In this world, survival would become not only a physical struggle, but also an emotional one. Facing fear and death, being surrounded by gunfire, explosions, and death notifications would change your entire mental makeup in an instant. At the start of the war, when you head to the front, your life suddenly transforms into an unfamiliar, terrifying, and wild world. The training process had only taught you the basics of survival, but the reality of the front line shows you that everything is much different. The first days mark a period where almost everything is unknown. Every step carries a deadly risk, and fear and uncertainty wrap around you with all their power. During this time, the constant presence of death next to you affects you deeply, not just physically, but psychologically as well. On one side, you face the military rules that were taught to you, and on the other, you confront the brutal realities of war. When you take your first step on the front line, the sight before you will perhaps be the most frightening thing you've ever seen. Trenches. At first, they may seem like some sort of shelter, but over time, they will begin to feel like hell. Mud, filth, insects, scattered cries, and gunshots surround you, and in an instant, you find yourself in the middle of a battle. On the front, time and space lose their meaning. You can't even tell how the days pass, because you're constantly face to face with death and dealing with numerous losses. Life in the trenches is under almost constant threat. In the narrow spaces you find to lie down, you witness the soldiers around you disappearing one by one. Explosions, gunshots, and the silence of death are always in your surroundings. On one side, you hear the booming sound of artillery rolling into the trenches, and on the other side, you face the fear created by a shell exploding just a few meters away. The possibility of a bullet hitting you or a bomb exploding at any moment reminds you of how fleeting everything is. The trenches lay bare the harsh realities of both sides of the war. Sometimes you have to lie in these pits for days, while at other times, you lie on your back, looking at the sky, and feel that the only thing that will help you survive is a fleeting breeze. Finding food and water is sometimes something you have to travel miles to get. If you're lucky, you might get a bit of rations, though insufficient. But most of the time, you have to battle all the difficulties the front brings, such as hunger and thirst. In these harsh conditions, even sleep feels like a luxury. When you try to close your eyes, you're afraid that a bullet might wake you. During the sleepless nights, the silence and darkness inside the trench are filled with disturbing thoughts. Many of you dream of your dead comrades throughout the night, dedicating yourself only to survival. However, there are moments when, face to face with death, you fight without hesitation just to stay alive. The struggle for survival on the front line is not just a physical effort, it also becomes a psychological battle. Fear. This is a feeling you constantly experience. Fear becomes so ingrained that after a while, whenever danger strikes, your body automatically reacts. Sometimes fear paralyzes you. You're too frightened to do anything. Other times, fear pushes you to act. You take any risk to survive, staying in the middle of the battle, not caring about your own safety. War tests the deepest emotional and mental structures of a person. With each passing day, the trauma, psychological disorders, and stress brought by war affect the soldiers even more deeply. Emotions like fear, anxiety, and depression become normalized feelings for most soldiers on the front. Many soldiers, in the first days of their deployment, try to manage this intense emotional pressure, while others simply collapse. Sometimes you experience discouraging, hopeless moments, and many soldiers realize during those times that there's no place to return to after the war ends. At night, it becomes incredibly difficult to forget the trauma of the war, not to remember the comrades you've lost, or not to think about what happens after every explosion on the front. Many times, the moments spent with friends who have been lost form a kind of bond. The surviving soldiers try to heal each other's emotional wounds, while also attempting to deal with the war and the internal conflicts they face. The challenging conditions of life on the front create a strong sense of camaraderie among soldiers. For many soldiers, war gains meaning through this camaraderie. During the tough days in the trenches, holding on to the soldiers beside you becomes one of the most important factors for survival. War binds a group of people together, and they become closely connected. The bond between you reaches a depth you've never experienced before. Sometimes, in the middle of the war, you realize that the most important thing for survival is simply being together. Camaraderie is not just about fighting together, it's about protecting each other. From the first days at the front, many soldiers tend to each other's wounds, eat together, fear together, and find courage together. Protecting each other's lives becomes one of the most human aspects of war. You somehow feel that war is built on one side by death and destruction, and on the other by friendship and loyalty. A soldier's daily struggle on the front is not only about bullets, but also about fulfilling basic survival needs. Finding food and water becomes a part of the survival battle. Being able to enter the trenches and access necessary supplies turns the war into a fight for survival. Water sources are limited, and food is often insufficient. Sometimes you have to go as far as enemy lines to get your meal. This situation wears you down not only physically, but also psychologically. Shelter is also a major issue. Trenches sometimes only provide a temporary solution. In trenches filled with dirt, mud, and water, staying long-term severely strains both your body and your mind. Many of you will have to spend the night in temporary shelters, and no matter how secure these shelters seem, they will always fall short against enemy attacks and natural hardships. After the first days on the front, you begin to understand how ruthless and destructive war truly is. Life in the trenches is an experience that drains you, not only physically, but mentally as well. War is never a simple struggle. It is a battle where life and death intertwine, and every moment is a test. Fear and uncertainty become burdens you must carry at all times. As you go deeper into the trenches, you begin to see the brutal side of war more clearly. Surviving in an environment where the smallest mistake could lead to death feels like a dream. The trenches do not only offer a physical refuge, they blur the lines between life and death. In a world where a bullet can change your life in an instant, and every step is fraught with danger, distinguishing right from wrong becomes impossible. In the trenches, everything is dirty and worn down, filled with mud that can never be cleaned, and your proximity to the enemy at any given moment can place you in a new danger. Sometimes, when you realize that your comrades have disappeared, you come to understand how isolating life on the front can be. One of the toughest aspects of war is facing loss and death constantly. Sometimes accepting that a single shot could end your life becomes a burden greater than any internal loss. With each passing day on the front, you are mentally strained more and more. Fear is not a feeling only experienced at the start of the war. You feel it at all times, living with the constant anxiety of death lurking behind every trench. Sometimes what feels normal to you becomes terrifying for others. For example, just a momentary glance from the edge of the trench could lead to enemy fire, a continuous and vague threat that surrounds you. Every day spent on the front feels like it lasts longer than a year. By the end of this ordeal, your psychological well-being may be deeply shaken. Fear and stress gradually become permanent. Many soldiers, by the end of each day, feel mentally exhausted and worn out from carrying the weight of the war. Often, soldiers who were cheerful and hopeful at the beginning of the war, over time, start to struggle with emotions such as anger, frustration, and depression. The effect of war on the human soul is much deeper than physical wounds. Mental trauma often lasts for years. Many soldiers, because of the fears and losses experienced during the war, are forced to face psychological issues afterward. This means that the trauma of war extends not only to the soldiers, but also to those around them. In the brutal conditions of war, camaraderie and friendships become the most important bonds for survival. On the front, the soldiers beside you are the ones who unite you without leaving a single chance of survival. A shared glance, a smile, or a joke with them may be the only thing that keeps you alive. Fighting with your friends, protecting each other in a world where death is always knocking at the door, forms a sense of meaning in life. Many soldiers are forced to fight alongside people they didn't know before the war. However, this quickly leads to the formation of friendships and the development of loyalty. In the face of the war's difficulties, the presence of a friend can ease the impact of destruction. Many soldiers will remember their time on the front as unforgettable moments shared with friends who saved their lives. However, as with all things, camaraderie faces the challenge of loss. Many of your friends will leave an irreplaceable void. The losses experienced on the front do not fill the emptiness inside, but deepen it. The loss of comrades reminds you not only of the brutal face of war, but also of how fragile and temporary life is. Many soldiers, after the death of their friends, begin to question the value of life. War is not just a physical battle. Confronting the enemy, living with the constant fear of death, and enduring a psychological and physical experience that pushes your limits. Many soldiers, in the first moments of war, don't know what to do or how to survive. But a few days later, killing, being killed, and the meaning of war itself begin to take form. Many soldiers realize that participating in the war has become merely an effort to survive. The struggle to find food and water forms the difference between life and death. One of the fundamental challenges of war is constantly fighting scarcity on the front. Food and drink are often insufficient, and entering the trenches and crossing enemy lines sometimes becomes a matter of survival. Many soldiers battle with hunger and thirst every day, fighting for the most basic needs essential to survival. These challenges require not only physical strength but also mental resilience. Many soldiers demonstrate internal resistance, not just physical endurance, to survive on the front. One of the scariest aspects of war is living in a world where everything can end at any moment. Life on the front line requires not only physical strength but also psychological resilience. War becomes a struggle that challenges mental endurance. Many soldiers at first believe that the war is a duty, a responsibility for their homeland. But as they face the true nature of war day by day, these thoughts gradually change. In a world where death is always nearby and loved ones disappear every day, the psychological burden of war becomes overwhelmingly heavy. One of the most brutal aspects of war is constantly confronting death and injury. Deaths are just numbers, but the impact of loss is deep and lasting. As your comrades disappear one by one, you begin to see them not just as friends, but as lifelines that keep you alive in the middle of the war. Every loss is not just the loss of a person, but also the loss of the world you were part of. The constant closeness of death changes a person's psychology moment by moment. Many soldiers are forced to accept the deaths of their close friends in a manner that fits the cold and temporary nature of war. Even at the end of the war, the memories of those you've lost follow you like a constant shadow. Many soldiers, after losing a friend, even fight to keep alive a memory of them. The physical and emotional wounds caused by war eventually consume the soldier's spirits. Sometimes a wound stays not just on the body, but also in the soul. War is not just a life or death struggle, but also a process in which a person's mental structure is tested, cracked, and broken. Many soldiers dream of their lost friends every night and continually internalize the traumas they've experienced. This emotional burden makes it impossible to erase the scars left by the war. War inflicts great damage, not only on the body, but also on the emotional state. The traumatic impact of war is so deep that it can be remembered at any moment. Many soldiers, after entering the war, struggle to overcome the trauma, no matter how hard they try to survive. For many soldiers, the terrifying memories of war revive in their minds at any given moment. Often, a moment of conflict, an explosion, or the sound of a gunshot can rekindle past traumas. The trauma war causes lasts for a long time. After the war, soldiers often struggle with psychological disorders. Depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, are the most common psychological issues faced by these soldiers. With each passing day, the soldier's psychological limits are pushed, and it reaches a point of no return. Often, when a soldier returns home and tries to resume their life, it is not to erase the war's marks, but to adapt to them. War brings out the most primal instincts in people. The survival instinct takes precedence over everything. Many soldiers, when they enter the war, aim to survive without losing their humanity. Over time, this instinct becomes so strong that survival becomes more important than friendship, moral values, or a sense of conscience. War tires people so much that at times personal values are replaced with the mere fight for survival. The survival instinct becomes so powerful that it changes the nature of the person. While soldiers struggle with the destructive effects of war, they often find themselves focused solely on surviving. War tests people from every direction. From personal values to friendships, everything is involved in the war. Many soldiers, while adapting to the harsh conditions of war to survive, cannot escape the effects of war. At the end of the war, many soldiers feel an internal emptiness when they return from the front. The life they left behind feels like it belongs to another world. The losses, injuries, deaths of friends, and everything they experienced on the front somehow mentally resurface every day. Nightmares are reflections of the trauma soldiers have lived through. Many soldiers encounter the scars left by war when they sleep. Sometimes the pain of losing loved ones repeats in the form of nightmares. Depression is another lasting effect of war. Many soldiers struggle to reintegrate into society after the war. While others begin to return to normal, the soldier battles with an internal void. The stress caused by war doesn't just last for a few days, but can persist for years. The scars of war leave a mark not just on the body, but also on the mind. One of the most challenging and unbearable aspects of war is accepting loss. Losing loved ones, friends, is a normal part of war, but accepting that loss and continuing with life is incredibly difficult. Many soldiers carry the memories of lost friends, the letters written to them, the conversations shared, the moments lived together, all stay in the memories that remain. Returning to the front, continuing life, and accepting the losses becomes a new kind of struggle. Many soldiers fight to forget those losses after the war, but the pain and depth of the loss never vanish. This is one of the most permanent marks in a person's life. Post-war life requires coming to terms with these losses and finding a way to live moving forward. War affects not only the soldiers on the front lines, but also the families they leave behind. For a soldier trying to survive thousands of kilometers away from home, one of the most challenging things is the longing for family and homeland. While volunteering for war may initially feel heroic, over time, you realize that war turns into not only death and loss, but also a deep longing for those left behind. After reaching the front, the only real connection war offers is communication with your family. Many soldiers find both morale and a way to maintain bonds with their loved ones by writing letters to them. In these letters, they write about their struggle for survival, the pain, and the challenges faced on the front lines. These letters to family members are, in a way, a lifeline, a thread they can hold on to reach their loved ones in the dark world of war. In the letters, the soldier often describes the conditions at the front, the hardships, and the uncertainty. However, more often than not, the soldier tries to maintain an optimistic tone to avoid upsetting the family. Phrases like "everything is fine" or "I'll be back soon" hide the harsh reality of war. Even though they are aware of the danger, a soldier always wants to bring good news to their family. These letters feel like a part of the family. Every line becomes a piece of home, and any information about the family attempts to alleviate the loneliness caused by war. However, these letters often do not reflect the truth. A soldier on the front avoids conveying their losses, fears, and the constant threat of death to their family. For them, a letter from the front is the only connection that shows they are alive. But the optimism in that letter contradicts the reality they feel inside. For soldiers on the front, home is not just a place. It symbolizes the lost sense of security. The daily life at home was far removed from the grim atmosphere of war, lived in a safe world. At the front, as everything seems threatened, the peace and calm of home become something to long for. Home is not just a physical space, but also a shelter, a mental safe zone. But thousands of kilometers away from home, you realize that peace is nothing more than a dream. Every time you remember your family, friends, and old life, it is both painful and hopeful. Seeing your family again, returning to a safe world, is one of the greatest motivations for many soldiers to survive during war. Being away from home may gradually cause a person to forget their identity, past, and values. Many soldiers may have entered the war with strength and determination, but over time, the lost friends, endless conflicts, and the deepening loneliness at the front shake their identity. Being away from home brings emotional voids, a permanent impact of war. Many soldiers feel lost in every moment of war. Being separated from family does not just create a physical gap, it also creates a psychological void. The harsh conditions of war and the constant threat of death can completely disconnect a person from their loved ones, their past, and the meaning of life as they once knew it. Another difficult aspect of war is the longing for the homeland. Home and family shine like a beacon of hope in a soldier's mind, but the homeland carries a much greater significance in terms of identity and belonging. In the midst of war, every memory, every impression of the homeland reminds them of a lost world. The homeland is not just land, it represents a culture and a sense of belonging. And this sense of belonging can be the soldier's most important reason for survival while constantly fighting the enemy. However, being far from the homeland and the dream of returning to a life there becomes as challenging as surviving the war itself. A soldier, buried in the war, sometimes realizes that the only memory they have of their homeland is the dream of an old song or the scent of home. The thought of returning to that country's land provides them with meaning in the midst of the war. Surviving the war also involves the hope of returning home, the desire to live freely again in that land. Many soldiers, when they return home after the war, realize that nothing will ever be the same. The life at home feels meaningless after the experiences at the front. Most soldiers, upon returning from war, begin to see their past life and old relationships as if they were strangers. When they return to their homeland, one of the greatest challenges is leaving behind the things they saw at the front. Home and family have now become mere memories. That old world feels like a past worthy of a lifetime. Many soldiers, when they return, try to adjust to their old life with the trauma left by the war. Family may no longer feel like the warm, secure place it once was. Every time you think about it, the losses of the past and the psychological effects of war continue to affect you deeply. However, over time, returning home and being with your family becomes an effort to rebuild life. With each passing day on the front, soldiers hope to reunite with their family and homeland, to return to their old life. For many soldiers, returning home after the war is like opening the door to a new beginning. However, this reunion is like a rebirth after the pains and losses experienced on the front. Returning to family, to homeland, may be the journey where everything finds its meaning. The end of the war does not signify an end, but rather a new beginning. Whether it is victory or defeat, both outcomes leave people with great exhaustion and trauma. After prolonged conflicts, a soldier returning from the front must deal with the physical and psychological effects of the hardships they faced. Many soldiers will pay the price of the victory they gained or the defeat they suffered for the rest of their lives. While victory brings a sense of relief after the war, this feeling fades quickly. Victory comes after great sacrifice and loss, so the taste of victory doesn't erase the scars of the pain, but creates more responsibility and uncertainty. Many soldiers after the war have the opportunity to understand how the victory or defeat has affected them psychologically. A war that ends in victory can often create a sense of dissatisfaction among the soldiers. The ultimate goal of war is to gain territory, declare victory, or defeat the enemy. But this success is overshadowed by the weight of the soldiers killed, the friends lost, and the lives destroyed. For many soldiers, the emotional burden that victory brings wipes away the honor and pride they felt before the war. Victory, in reality, is the price of everything lost, every moment, and every life, leaving deep scars in the souls of soldiers. On the other hand, defeat causes great moral destruction for soldiers. When the war is lost, everyone turns to blame each other. Defeat creates a huge sense of failure, but still, the soldiers who survive the war are the ones left behind. The end of the war marks not just the end of the battle, but also the turning point where they have survived their darkest and most difficult period. The end of the war, for a soldier, actually means a new challenge and a greater struggle. A soldier returning from the front comes home with all the trauma, losses, and both mental and physical scars. Home, which may seem like a point of hope to return to, is often a stranger to the soldier. After the war, rebuilding life, continuing old relationships, and reuniting with family is a very difficult task. Because after what has been experienced on the front, returning to your old life and starting a new life feels like a different world. Family members often find it hard to connect with a soldier returning from the front. The psychological effects of the war change the soldier's behavior and feelings. Many soldiers after the war experience constant depression, anxiety, anger, and difficulties in adjusting. While the family members try to remind them of happy memories from the past, the experiences on the front remain fresh wounds in the soldier's mind. The disharmony at home is challenging not only for the soldier but also for their family. Some soldiers, when they return, find it hard to truly come back home. Home, which was once a point of support for survival at the front, becomes a completely different world after the war. Sometimes soldiers realize they will not find the happiness and peace they once had. The internal scars of war push them further away from their former selves. Family members sometimes notice that their loved ones have changed after returning from the war, and this can create a rift in their relationships. Many soldiers, after returning from the war, may not find the respect and recognition they expect from society. Being on the winning side of the war may attract society's attention, while being defeated can create a sense of loneliness. After the war, most people see soldiers not just as heroes, but simply as people who carried the burden of war. Many soldiers, upon returning, experience a sense of incompatibility with the society they left behind. Some soldiers, when they return, try to escape the memories of the war and attempt to build a normal life again. But despite society's efforts to detach them from the reality of the war, the wounds inside the soldier become more apparent over time. The scars of war prevent returning soldiers from rediscovering their social roles. Brotherhood, fear, losses, and the psychological effects of war prevent the soldier from rebuilding their social structure. A soldier returning from the end of the war faces both physical and psychological problems. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, and anxiety are some of the most brutal lasting effects of war. The trauma, death, and loss experienced during the war leave deep marks on the soldier's inner world. Many soldiers feel alienated from society at the end of the war. In the post-war period, depression and loneliness are the external expressions of the emotional burdens carried by the soldier. The fears and losses experienced on the front lead to significant changes in the soldier's mental state. Many soldiers struggle to adapt to normal life. However, these psychological and emotional difficulties after the war can break the soldier's relationship with society and push them into deep loneliness. War becomes not only a physical journey, but also a mental one. At the end of the war, the soldier's greatest struggle is not to survive, but to make peace with their past. For many soldiers, war is not just a fight for survival, but a search for meaning. Beyond victory or defeat, the greatest meaning of war for every soldier is facing the losses they have suffered and making peace with those losses. True victory is not surviving, but coping with all the traumas brought by the war and embracing life once again. For a soldier, participating in World War I becomes one of the greatest challenges of their time. When the war ends, what remains is not just the gains and losses, but also the mental, physical, and societal impacts of the war. It must be acknowledged that war leaves significant marks, not only physically, but also psychologically. War is an experience that transforms a person both physically and mentally, forcing them to confront their past. The impact of war on a soldier goes beyond physical injuries. An explosion at the front, a bullet wound, could mark the beginning of traumas that may last for years. However, war is not just a physical threat. It is also a psychological battle. Many soldiers struggle with physical injuries after the war, while their mental wounds deepen over time. The marks left on the body not only signify the violence of war, but also symbolize an inner emptiness. Many soldiers have been exposed to the harsh conditions of war, the constant threat of death, the loss of their comrades, and the terrifying effects of the enemy. Every explosion, every conflict weakens a person's mental state further. Many soldiers, in the post-war period, find it difficult to cope with the psychological issues they face. Conditions such as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, may persist throughout a soldier's life. Mental health problems sometimes last longer than physical injuries. At the end of the war, one of the most challenging processes for a soldier is accepting the loss. Every loss on the battlefield becomes not only the loss of a comrade, but also a reminder of how brutal and deadly the war was. After these losses, the surviving soldier has lost not just a fighter, but a human being. Many soldiers, having witnessed the deaths of their comrades, deeply feel the senselessness of war and the emptiness it leaves behind. Accepting loss is emotionally exhausting for a soldier. At the end of the war, to continue with life, one must make peace with the past. Forgetting the losses, pains, and traumas of the past may be the greatest obstacle to a fresh start. Many soldiers continue to carry the pain of their surviving comrades even after the war, struggling to free themselves from the scars of the past. With the end of the war, a new journey begins for a soldier. However, this journey is not a fresh start free from the scars of the past, but an inner journey that must be made with the wounds left by the war. Confronting the traumas of the past, accepting losses, and starting over with these experiences is a difficult but necessary step. Many soldiers, after the war, embark on a years-long effort to emotionally rebirth, make peace with the past, and look to the future with hope. At the end of the war, the soldier's soul is filled with both pessimism and hopelessness, yet also burns with the desire to start anew, to live again. The end of the war sometimes reminds them of the lost dreams and the losses, rather than creating hope for the future. The painful traces of war challenge hopes for the future. Many soldiers struggle for years to return to normal. This means trying to find a place again in society, returning to the old life and rebuilding the past life. Hope for the future sometimes seems like a light far away. A soldier, transformed into a completely different person due to the effects of war, wishes to escape some of the pains brought by the war and losses. However, this desire is always accompanied by a sense of emptiness and sorrow. At the end of the war, the surviving soldier truly desires a new beginning. But this new beginning is made without completely shedding the pains of the past. For some soldiers, hope for the future symbolizes the return of their loved ones, the revival of the lives of lost comrades. However, the person returning after the war can never be the same. A soldier, changed both physically and mentally, tries to cope with the burdens that life and war have placed upon them. This is often a struggle caught between rebuilding the past and constructing the future. War can bring many things to a soldier, but the things it takes away are sometimes irreplaceable. War is an experience that transforms a person, testing them both physically and psychologically. Many soldiers, thanks to the war, develop survival skills and instincts. They also deeply explore values like camaraderie, solidarity, and brotherhood. But all these cannot outweigh the losses, traumas, and pains encountered. What war takes away is the loss of one's soul, identity, humanity, love, and friendships. Many soldiers return from the war filled with both physical and psychological traumas. The gains of war pale in comparison to the losses. Many soldiers will never be able to rediscover the person they were before the war. The emptiness left by war can last a lifetime. As a result, a soldier who participates in World War I battles not only the conflicts on the battlefield, but also the comprehensive effects of the war. Physical wounds, psychological traumas, lost comrades, and endless longings are the marks left by war. War is a process that transforms a person's body and soul, taking them on a difficult journey. And after this journey, a soldier must somehow leave their losses, pains, and past behind as they try to continue with their life. The lasting effects of war on a soldier always persist. These effects are not only a great test for those who participated in the war, but also for the families, societies, and all of humanity waiting for them. The traces of war never disappear. They are always remembered as a part of the past, the war and the natural struggle of humankind. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. See you with new content. Take care.